So just as a way of introduction, Bentwood boxes have been a part of Northwest Coast culture for thousands of years. There's some that have been found archaeologically, and many others that predate European visiting to the Northwest Coast, and a lot of those are you can tell those from the style of the form line design, those that are hundreds, if not thousands of years old, such as this is actually a screen that's in Cluckwan at the moment, and it will be apparently going on display in the new Heritage Center next year. But it's a screen representing a stack of Bentwood boxes, and in that it is a group of very fancifully decorated chests containing at'u or other wealth. A stack of boxes is a symbol for power and status and wealth, and so the box itself is really a powerful symbol. And here again in this this house that's partly deconstructed, but you can see the wall is missing in the back, but the retaining planks have a series of Bentwood chests carved on them, interspersed with Tana designs. And Tanas, of course, we read as a symbol of wealth and power, and boxes too, in that they contain wealth and power, and at'u, they are also symbolic, I think, of the wealth and status of the owner of this house and his lineage. So we see Bentwood boxes in historical photographs, both fancy decorated chests like these in the Whale House in Cluckwan, and there's also utilitarian boxes, of course, that show up a lot as well. But in this particular photo, this box here is a very special type called that I call a telescoping box. It's actually a box within a box. The inner portion of it, there's a smaller box inside, and you lift the decorated portion off with the cover. It's attached to the cover, and then there's another box plain on the inside of that that's attached to the base. So it makes a very, very protective type of container for precious objects, and it would be the kind of thing that if you were taking at'u on a canoe, you would probably want to put it in a telescoping box, because that's a way to better protect it from the elements. And that particular box is in the Burke Museum collection, and it's I think Bill Holm attributed this to the Haida, and it also shows that objects such as boxes were used for trade a lot, and the box and the chest in this case in and of itself is a valuable art object, and probably became Tlingit at'u as soon as they obtained it. So
the Ganakatedi owners of this chest recognized it as having come from the Haida to begin with as well.
A lot of these chests have the top and bottom are red cedar, but the sides are yellow cedar, and I'm not sure, does yellow cedar have a tendency to bend more readily than red, or? And then in many cases, when things like this are illustrated in catalogs, you might see a front view, but you may not see what's on the side. And in a lot of cases on Bentwood chests, the decoration on the ends is not what you might see on the front and back. It's doesn't necessarily take up the entire side of the box. It's a portion thereof, and in this case it's painted and not carved, and so it can be a more abbreviated design than what you see on the front. And this is a different Bentwood box, but it shows kind of outline of a form line design. But Steve, do you think that something like this would be considered a finished design, or was this something in progress that was just never completed? The other end of this is just like it. It's just an outline. Yeah. This one's from Cake. I mean, it seems like it could be a beginning of a design, because I think, it seems to be that when doing a form line design, you outline both the edges of the form line and then fill in between the outline.
I've never seen this photograph before, but I'm kind of blown away by it, I have to say, because when in teaching design, well, I often like to have students look at this type of composition, which is much more free form than is commonly, say, on the front of a chest or a box. Those seem to, at least in many cases, follow a kind of a conventionalized pattern based on a much older tradition of profile heads on the top, the main head, and another creature's head on the bottom, and that sort of got conventionalized into the main head, ovoids in the upper corners, ovoids in the lower corner, much more stylized and less representative. But then a composition like this, which is really free form, and you can see how the artist might have started with major ovoids and then just using a paintbrush or a paint stick like a pencil, extended lines and made some general assignments of space in terms of ovoid here and extended form line coming down. And so it's hard to say if the artist was really intent ultimately in finishing this out and painting it out. It certainly could have, but it may be another kind of motive or a decision to leave it in this really skeletal, kind of ethereal form. I think it's really exciting to see that. Where is that? Oh, how handy. We can go look at it.
You have to take a 40-hour safety training course to get at that right now. But yeah, I mean, this really, it's a striking thing, and it's this is where the two ends of the box come together, and you can see on the left side there's peg holes there where they've pinned the two ends of the board together to make it a four-sided box. But yeah, this kind of reminds me of when Steve teaches form line. He'll do these amazing compositions on the chalkboard and do something a lot like this up there, just freehand, and it's just got a beautiful movement to it. And just watching him draw is just really a great experience. And then he spends 45 minutes doing a drawing, and then he grabs the eraser and starts to go like this, and the students just want to jump up, and it's like they want to take the chalkboard down and varnish it or something and try to save it. But then he'll just do another one. So it's really pretty cool. And see, this is a museum exhibit showing how that telescoping process works there. The smaller box on the inside, it's attached to the base, but the sides that you see are attached to the lid. Yeah, this one's at the Field Museum in Chicago. Pretty amazing. And then there's a number of these telescoping boxes that have been found in crevices and caves in southeast Alaska, and many of them are thought to be burial boxes for human remains. And this one, you can see it's weathered and it's got some rot on the edges and it's somewhat damaged. And this is the type that was used for, maybe not exclusively for burial of human remains, but at least some of them are. And these kind of boxes are the boards that go to make the sides. It's maybe 10 to 12 inches high on this style, this really old style. And then the lid itself is another 6 to 8 inches thick, and a lot of these are actually hollowed up inside. So when you take this off, the contents could actually be piled higher than the top edge of the box.
A second ago, I was talking about the way that some older examples, and this is one of those, have really literal profile heads up above what you'd call the main face or main head of the box. And so this is really literally a bird's head in profile, and you can even see either pin feathers or wing, and then there's a red foot there with feathers on the back of it. And I think it's those older ones that show this literal representation then are the things that over time became conventionalized, and the literal appearance of a profile head sort of disappeared and got obscured by form lines that were were much less representative, let's put it that way, and that came to the conventionalization of a ovoid in the upper corner. And one of the interesting things about that box screen that Steve showed at the very beginning is there's two of those. One has 9 chests on it, one has 6. And out of those 15 examples of a chest design, there's only 1 or 2 that are even remotely related to what you think of as a conventionalized 19th century chest design. And the others are like this, where they're so different, and each one so different from the next, that, and that's you can tell from looking at that and examining even the way it's carved, that screen is in the neighborhood of 300, who knows, maybe more years old. It's a really, really old object. And it might be saying something about during what time period that conventionalization of the design form took place that's so common in the 19th century.
And this is the other side of the same box. And there are a few of these around. That one of the other ones has actually been radiocarbon dated, and it's about 650 years before present. And that, as far as I know, is about the earliest fairly solid radiocarbon date that we have on anything with relatively fully formed form line design on it. And so later a lot of those details were dropped, and you might just have an ovoid up in that upper corner, but none of the feathers or feet or anything. And then here's the end of that, one of the ends of that box. Kind of a, what's that? This one is in a private collection. And most of these are either in the process of being repatriated or have been repatriated to tribes as they are funerary objects. This is a really unusual lid and sides of a telescoping box that's in the American Museum of Natural History, and it's the form line design here has always struck me as being somewhat unusual, and every time I see it I think of the art of John Hoover for some reason. But any thoughts on that, Steve?
One of the interesting things to me is the use of that grooving texture. It's on the surface of the part that's inlaid with the percula. It's on the surface of the part that has the design on. So before anything else was done, the whole surface was textured with those parallel lines. And that seems to be a really old surface treatment that goes back probably even before the formline system developed. And you see it on the southern coast and you see it on the northern coast. Now, this thing, it just puzzles the heck out of me. And it's really hard to imagine where this is from. It's clearly old, but it's just an enigma, this one, to figure out where that might have originated. Is it farther south where the northern system hadn't quite influenced the design style so much, and it's a freer expression of that, or what? But it's just a remarkable thing.
Well, it's always tempting to try to figure out what the crests are in this case, and this is just a complete guess on my part, but I've always seen this as the top figure, at least, as a sea lion split down the middle, and it's joined by one element of the tail flippers there where it's common, but then there's separate appendages that come off, and it frames this face, and then the body is just pretty not very detailed, but then you have the head here, and the snout is in the air, and its mouth is open, kind of like you see him swimming through the water. And then there's these really fluidly elongated U-form elements that are sort of coming off the nose, and maybe that's the spray coming out of the nose, or whiskers coming back. I'm not really sure, but that's what it seems to me as. And it seems like on a lot of these earlier boxes, whatever the crest figure is, it's joined by the tip of the snout or the tip of the tail, and you have the whole, a mirror image of the whole body laid out on each side. Here's one. I'm not sure how this got so off kilter, but this one's in the Peter the Great Museum of Anthropology in St. Petersburg, Russia, and was probably one of those early Russian collections from Southeast Alaska. This also is a telescoping box, so the side of the lid and base are actually taller than the bent wood portion of it here in the middle. It's got the formline design. And here's one that the lid is wide enough to be able to have these carvings of humanoid faces on there outlined in opercula. And again, here's the bird-like head and joined at the tip of the snout, and a long mouth-like element. And this one is Emmons collected it and said this represents a bear in the center, and then formline profiles of the bear on each side. And this also is a telescoping box. This one's in the down. I think so, yeah. And this one is in the Denver Art Museum, said to be, well, it's part of the Walter Waters collection, so this could very well be from Chief Shake's house. And this is one of the later styles where the bird's head is perhaps now just an ovoid and a little bit of beak detail there on the sides. This one is in Germany. I'm not sure which museum, but I think on some of the Bentwood boxes, there's even though it's a two-dimensional design on the ovoids and salmon trout's head, they've crowned them a bit, so it gives it more round. The major ovoids have this bulginess to them. The oldest one that I mentioned does have tertiary areas on it, very, very finely, not very tall. Yeah, and so it was starting to come in, and I don't know if if there was if it was more difficult to obtain the color at that time, or what. Do you have any thoughts on that? So here's one that's got a large amount of the opercula inlays actually on the box itself. I think this is in the Field Museum, but I don't remember where it's from exactly. This one is in the Peabody Museum at Harvard. It's a red cedar Bentwood box from Wrangell, and it has some kind of mammal-like creature with large incisors, maybe a beaver or marmot or something along those lines. That's the the front, and then here are the sides. I thought it was neat how on the sides you just had one, the black color, and the opposite side, the red. And so we'll switch over from looking at chest to maybe the more common Volkswagen type box that is more ubiquitous, and that's more of a square a box that's taller than it is wide, with a thick lid on it that seems very very widespread on the northern northwest coast. This one's from one of the clans in Sitka. And here's the lid of another one that shows that how they've lightened it and made it less likely to split by digging out the inside of those, and it also gives you a little bit more space to put the contents in there, and that could be ceremonial regalia at U, or it could be food or tools or whatever. These were used for all sorts of purposes. In fact, cooking was another one of the uses, although I don't think I've ever run across an old cooking box in any museum collections, although maybe at the Ozette site did they find any? And you should see some scorching on the insides of the cooking boxes from where the hot rocks, where it's coming in contact with the wood, it is hot enough still to burn it a bit. At least when I tried it one time, I made a Bentwood box and used some rocks and just put a couple of baseball-sized rocks in there, and the water was boiling in just a couple minutes. It was pretty efficient.
They'd been really saturated by the oils of whatever was in the cook. So if you're boiling fish or whatever, a lot of oil that migrates into the wood, and so they had that kind of shiny, oily appearance that really set them out as cooking. That whole little miniaturized figure in what's usually the body area that often would just have hands or something like that, and so here's the whole little body, and then another really unusual early characteristic from 18th century and earlier containers like this is that those really angular U-shapes coming down each side, there's nothing painted in there. Everything else has some kind of form line compositional thing going on, but they're left totally blank, and I'm sure that was the finished object at that point, because that shows up with some frequency in earlier things. And then up in that upper corner and the cheek design, you see the regular kind of elaboration of spaces within the main form lines, but that blank area becomes really obvious, and yet it was part of the original composition. Now, I don't know if that would have had a particular meaning to this representation or not. I have no idea. But just looking at it from a compositional standpoint, it's really interesting.
Yeah, and you have the almost half of the design is made up by the head, and then the body is relatively small. And then if you look at the body, the arms and legs have humanoid-like hands on them, but the legs are kind of curved around and have more like a claw or a flipper on them, and sometimes that might indicate a transformation of humanoid to some other form. Here's another of the taller box design showing what the side is like here. This one is this one in the Burke? Yeah, that's a great design there of the bird with a ovoid in its beak. It's a little hard to see, but. And this is one by Norman Jackson of Cake that he did a few years ago. One of that sort. Then there's another type of box that the design carries over two of the four corners. This is one box, but showing images of each side merge together in the middle where they overlap that corner.
In the middle, so that what would be the front of a chest forms two sides of a box, and then the other side of the chest, so to speak, forms the other two sides. So the center design bends right around the corner.
This one shows somewhat of what Katie was asking about, where the area for the tertiary form line is relatively thin because the primaries and secondaries are so thick. It doesn't leave a lot of space for the blue-green color, so you just have an outline around the ovoid of blue-green, a little bit there, a little bit up there, and then there's a bit there and there. But really, that's it seems like the older boxes have a relatively small amount of blue-green, and over the years, as the primary and secondary form lines narrow up, that gives more tertiary space available, and you see more of the blue-green used. And I'm not, that could have nothing to do with the availability of the blue-green paint, although it does seem that's the rarest of the three colors from what I could understand.
That could be middle 18th century or even before that. And interesting, again, there's that like a very wide mouth across the top and the profile heads. And then that really unusual head right in the center bottom, the round, almost round ovoid eyes in the mouth, and then a shoulder and a long limb, arm or leg, whatever you want to call it, foreleg, that loops into the back corner of the main head's mouth, and then the claw-like feet on either side of the head itself. So there's an amazing overlap of figures there, all occupying the same space. And again, representationally, I wouldn't know how to interpret that. The person who made the box and the clan for which it was made would be able to explain all that, and that's certainly out of my field, so to speak. But just in terms of the development of the compositional structure and the relationship of design forms to each other, that's a really remarkable object.
Here's one that's obviously a later form line design where the primaries and secondaries have narrowed, and there's a lot more, not only tertiary, but the background of the yellow cedar shows through as well. And one of those type of boxes with the corners with them tied up, so you could fasten the lid down, and it makes it the top won't fly off. And also, if you need to pack this box, you can attach a tump line and chest strap to the cordage there, and it makes it easier to tote these around, because they were carried overland at times when carried by canoe a lot, but then in certain areas there were trails going to the interior, and you'd have people putting these on like backpacks and using a tump line, forehead strap, and a shoulder strap to carry them.
Because you had mentioned on that other one how narrow what would be carved out spaces painted blue are on that example, and this is sort of the evolutionary opposite of that, where the black lines are so thin and the red lines are so thin that now the part that would be carved away and or painted blue is huge. Of course, there is no blue on this, but the areas that would be, where the yellow of the wood is showing through, are gigantic compared to something from 100 or even 50 years earlier. So this is probably from the northern BC area, and where that refinement or development of that very thin form line style really reached its peak in the middle 19th century.
Then of course, the red corner box, which seems to be pretty closely aligned with the Tlingit tribe. I don't think I've seen many of these from other Yeah, and these have usually have a geometric pattern on the lid, which you can't really see here, but it's like kind of like a checkerboard, and some squares or triangles are painted red, and the other is just the wood color coming through. And these are really sophisticated and elegant little boxes. I think in originally they were for packing all sorts of food or other materials. This one is oozing seal oil or hooligan grease out of it, so used for a grease box there. But they're really really beautifully made, and the sides aren't flat. They have a carved bend in them. The corners are bent with steam, but the sides are curved by carving, and it adds a degree of refinement and elegance to the box. This is one from the Portland Art Museum that I always thought was cool because it seems to be plain on the outside but painted elaborately on the inside. Yeah, that's pretty wild, and I'm not I'm not sure how well the paint would hold up if they painted it first and then bent it, or so as far as there's lots of different specialized boxes too, and I have to unfortunately speed up because we're already a little over time, but I did want to show you a few more. Toolboxes. This is a set of artist tools at Princeton, a little Bentwood box for the knives and drills and paintbrushes, and there's even a bit of shark skin for sandpaper there, and a bear's tooth to sharpen the knives, and pumice to take the rust off the knives. A pretty complete set, and a lot of those toolboxes are like this that have a lid that actually fits down over the four sides of the box, and I think another way of making it more weatherproof. And then it has a carrying handle in the middle made out of leather. This is in the Seattle Art Museum. Is this does that ads go with the box, or okay? Do you know where this box is from?
Same proportions and the same interesting style of grooving. It looks almost like a palisade of logs vertically all the way around. And there's one in the museum in Campbell River. I forget the name of the museum. It might just be Campbell River Museum. But there's one just like that, and they attribute it to Haida, and it has the same kind of lid and all that. And like Steve said, the overlap, you can see that along the top of the carved ridge section, it's flattened off because the lid overlaps on the outside, which is the opposite of the usual rectangular lid that's flat top, where the lip is on the inside. And this one, the water, if this was used outside or carried in a canoe, the water would run off the not flat lid and around the corner, but it wouldn't go inside the box. A regular flat top box, the water would come down the edge, and by capillary action, it would work its way under the lid and down inside the box. So, like you said, this is a weatherproofing measure.